Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today we're going to be analyzing the 2018 Senate election in the state of Texas. So this has been hotly requested. So it's going to be pretty interesting to go through this. Right now we have a Republican incumbent, Senator Ted Cruz. I'm pretty sure a number of you know him, mainly because of his whole government shutdown fiasco and then leading into the 2016 presidential election, probably coming in at second place. Actually, he did come in second place in the Republican primary, losing to Donald Trump. And right now he is running for re-election out of the state of Texas in the Senate race here. On the Democratic side, we have Beto O'Rourke. He is a Democratic representative. Of course, he has to give up a seat in order to run for the United States Senate. But regardless, he is running on the ballot, and he is the Democratic frontrunner. He was the Democratic frontrunner. So we're going to first of all take a look at polling numbers. That's going to be a very good indication of what we see in the 2018 midterm elections. People like to mention that the polls are consistently wrong, and they weren't. They were only wrong in 4 states in 2016 out of 50 states, and all of them except for one of them was within the margin of error. So keep that in mind when it comes down to opinion polling. Opinion polling is not necessarily always wrong because it was wrong once, and political pundits aren't always wrong because they were wrong once. Keep that in mind when you're analyzing data, and you can't just completely disregard polling number, which is why it's one of the first things you actually look to when you try to find the outcome of a race. You don't go to a fortune teller and ask who wins. You look at the data there, and that's exactly what I'm doing now. So the current RCP average is Ted Cruz plus 6.5. In fact, in 2012, he won by 16 percentage points, 16.1% to be exact, and right now he's leading by 6.5%. So clearly there is Democratic excitement. Democratic excitement is there. There is a number of people, a number of Republican voters are either leaning towards the Democrats, and a number of independent voters seem like they could vote for the Democratic nominee, and that's pretty substantial. Coming out of the state of Texas, Ted Cruz is currently polling under the 50% mark. The most recent poll done by Quinnipiac shows Ted Cruz leading by 6%, and then a poll right before that shows Cruz leading by only 2%. So yes, this race could get close, but keep in mind both candidates are under 50%, including Senator Ted Cruz. So he's not truly at an advantage at this point in time, but that also doesn't mean this is going to be a Democratic pickup. It definitely could get close, and when we're looking at a number of factors, actually, since we're talking about polls, we can go back and look at 2012. Ted Cruz typically performs what polls says he would. So right now we're looking at the I believe this is Real Clear Politics average in 2012 of Cruz versus Paul Sadler, and Ted Cruz won the polls by an average of 15.9%. We go into the 2012 general election. He wins the 2012 general election by 16.1%. So he does pretty well according to opinion polls, and he typically performs around that margin. If we go ahead and take a look, let me see if I can find it here. The 2018, actually it might be, let me see if I can find it real quick. Actually, we'll come back to that a little bit later. It's not that important, but still, I'm right here. Ted Cruz, you average both of these polls, he should have won the primary by 82%. Well, he won it by 80. He should have won with 82% of the vote. My bad. He won with 85% of the vote. Okay. Also, Beto O'Rourke also outperforms polls. According to the average of these two, he should have won with 55.5% of the vote. He got 61.79% of the vote. But these are both amongst Republican and Democratic voters. Obviously, Ted Cruz with the Republicans and Beto O'Rourke with the Democrats. But regardless, Ted Cruz typically performs around the margins that polls say he would. And also looking back in 2012 when we had President at the time, Barack Obama, on the ballot for the Texas presidential election race. Of course, Mitt Romney won. We already know that. But also looking at the Senate race here, there should have been a little bit more excitement on the Democratic side, considering that there was a very popular man in the Democratic Party at the top of the ticket, and Ted Cruz was still able to win by 16.1%. So what if this just was the Democratic candidate? Let's go back to the last time we had a Democratic wave in a midterm election year, and that would be the 2006 midterm elections. And in the 2006 midterm elections, Texas had a Senate race, just as they are having one now in a Democratic wave year. And Kay Bailey Hutchinson got 61.7% of the vote, and her Democratic opponent got 36% of the vote, a 25.7% difference between the Republicans and the Democratic Party in a Democratic wave year. Sure, Texas demographics were different, but also this should be a little bit showing you that even when there are Democratic waves, Republicans typically don't underperform. When we look back at 2000, it wasn't that much of a difference when George Bush got elected by a very small margin out of the state of Florida in the presidential election. Well, she barely underperformed. what happened in the year 2000. And if Ted Cruz underperforms by around 5%, just say 5%, he still wins his election. Okay, his last election he won, I believe 56.6% of the vote. Take 5% away, he still wins the election. Okay, so keep that in mind. Also, his approval rating. His approval rating, a lot of people expect to be dismal. A lot of people expect to be horrible. I mean, it is Ted Cruz. He's very unlikable. That's coming from my opinion, and a lot of people view him that way just based off the things that he's done in the past. But he has a 48% approval rating, 35% disapproval rating, net 13% approval rating. That's pretty good for someone who has a Republican colleague who has a lower approval rating, obviously lower disapproval rating because not as many people know them. But typically, when there's someone like, let's go to my state of Maryland, for example. Let me see if I can find it real quick. We have two Democratic incumbents, obviously. The newly elected senator, Chris Van Hollen, first elected in 2016, 46% approval rating. Ben Cardin, who's up for re-election in 2018, 47% approval rating. But they're probably going to win their states by around 60, they're probably going to win with 60 to 70% in their re-election bid, probably in 2018, especially with it being a Democratic wave year. And Ted Cruz has a 48% approval rating. So if 48% of voters vote for him and 35% of voters go against him, and there are 17% undecided voters, given how Republican the state of Texas is, they're likely to go right over and vote for Ted Cruz. Even if some go to the Democratic side, it's probably not enough to push Ted Cruz below that 50% mark and, not cross that finish line. And also when we're looking at fundraising, well, typically when Democratic candidates are poised to win, we saw it in the Georgia 6th race where the Democratic candidate didn't win, but also, severely outraised the Republican Party by millions of dollars. And if we look at a number of other races like the Alabama Senate race, or when it came down to Virginia governor race, New Jersey governor race, the Democratic Party typically outspent and out-fundraised the Republican Party. Well, not right now. Ted Cruz has more money. Sorry, I'm completely out of just this entire page. Is a little confusing to me, but still, Ted Cruz, a lot of his money is coming from bigger businesses. A lot of Beto O'Rourke's money is coming from smaller areas across the entire state of Texas and across the country because he is getting a lot of support. A couple of my friends I actually know have donated a lot of money to Beto O'Rourke, combined, not individually, but still, they're from the state of Maryland. So, when it comes down to it, this is not directly affecting them. They just want to see a Democrat win in Texas, which is why there's a lot of money coming from out of the state of Texas going to Beto O'Rourke. Whereas Ted Cruz is getting a lot of money outside of the state of Texas as well, but he's still fundraising the same amount, nearly the same amount. There's a difference of thousands of dollars between Ted Cruz's fundraising money and Beto O'Rourke's fundraising money. So when it comes down to it, they're pretty even in terms of spending, where they can spend their money. TV ads. And Ted Cruz is the incumbent. Not everyone in Texas knows who Beto O'Rourke is, but everyone in Texas knows who Ted Cruz is. So he will have that on his side as well. And also his approval rating being at 48% doesn't seem like that many Texans are against him at this point in time, and his disapproval rating at 35%. So 35 out of 100 people in the state of Texas don't approve of him, but around half of people out of 100 people in Texas do approve of him. So around half of the entire state of Texas approves of him, just off by 2%. And also, let's go ahead and take a look at the 2018 Democratic primary. Let me see if I can pull the results real quick. Beto O'Rourke won with 61.79% of the vote. Well, also, let's go ahead and take a look at the Democratic primary in 2018 according to the Texas county map. Well, if you look, Beto O'Rourke clearly won. He is in the blue. His other two opponents are in the orange and red. If you look over here, it looks like he sweeped most of the state. Okay, but keep in mind this area over here is Republican territory. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 2012 Senate election. These are all Republican counties, with the exception of a few. Okay, we look at the Democratic primary. This was Beto O'Rourke's stronghold in the primary. Let's look in this area. Well, his opponents did pretty well here compared to him. They won these counties. He did not. These are the same counties he needs to win if he wants to even have a chance at winning the 2018 Senate race. So he's not doing too well when it comes down to the voters in the key areas that are key Democratic areas. I mean, looking over here, a number of Democratic counties, and this is when Ted Cruz did phenomenal against his Democratic opponent. If you look back at 2016, I don't have the county map, but if you look at the 2016 presidential election, there were a couple more blue counties, but still, this is the general area that the Democratic Party needs to win, and Beto O'Rourke did not win there in the Democratic primary. So he's going to have to gain a number of voters that would have voted for these candidates that did do better than Beto O'Rourke here, would have voted for them enthusiastically in the 2018 general election. Well, over here, maybe a couple counties could flip, But it's not likely that a number of these solid Republican counties are going to flip. I mean, look how dark red they are compared to dark blue or lighter red areas over here. And also, there clearly was Democratic excitement. The Democratic Party gained 540,000, well, 312, but, a couple voters with a lot more voters on the Democratic side than there were previously. Clearly, the Democratic Party doesn't come out and vote as much as Republicans in the state of Texas. Otherwise, the state would have been more contested than it was in previous election years. On the Republican side, the Republican Party gained 137,000 voters. So there were a lot more voters on the Democratic side than there were in previous Senate primaries, which is really good for the Democratic Party. But it also could be a telltale sign that this could be their only voting group. Okay, when it comes down to it, looking at this map here, a number of their voters came around from this area. And yes, a number of them also did come from down here, which is why the numbers were so high, because these are bigger cities. But still, looking at this map, if the Democratic Party and Beto O'Rourke himself is doing much better amongst Democrats in areas that are typically Republican, they're probably not going to be able to overcome the Republican voters. But again, the Texas Senate race is not decided by an electoral college vote or anything like that. It's a popular vote. So meaning if he does outperform in these areas, it definitely could help him win the general election if he was to win. And keep in mind, if states like Texas are going to go even by a narrow margin, a number of other states are going to go. Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia, Florida, North Dakota, Nevada, Arizona. A number of these states would have to go if Texas did go, mainly because of the fact that these states are more Democratic than the state of Texas in the Senate race here. Maybe not in a presidential election. North Dakota, Missouri, Montana, Indiana, West Virginia all voted for Trump more than the state of Texas. But still, the state of Texas is probably a little bit more leaning to the right than Indiana or West Virginia or Missouri or North Dakota or Montana or even Florida, because of the fact that when we're looking at the margins that were in previous elections and the current incumbents, a number of these states that I just previously mentioned had Democratic incumbents. Well, Texas has a Republican incumbent, and that is Senator Ted Cruz. And also looking back at 2006 yet again, when we're looking at the Democratic wave year of 2006, well, the Republican Party did phenomenal. So I'm actually going to get rid of that because it wasn't too important when it came down to it. But also looking at the generic congressional vote, the Democrats are down a little bit, but also they're still at a pretty consistent lead. When we look at the polls out of the state of Texas, well, this lead isn't necessarily correlating with what we're seeing here. Before, the first poll ever taken showed a tie. It's not on Real Clear Politics because I don't think they accepted it, but there was a tie between Beto O'Rourke and Senator Ted Cruz at about 30%. That was when he started getting mainstream attention as a Democratic frontrunner. Well, right now, Ted Cruz is leading by 6.5%. Not the best for the Ted Cruz campaign, but if he wins by 6.5%, it's still a win, and it's still a win outside of the leaning column. Okay, so when it comes down to it, Ted Cruz is at a pretty good standpoint. He typically does exactly what polls are going to say, and that's not necessarily the worst thing. We can go ahead and take a look at the Republican primary in the 2016 election. Well, if you look at this, Ted Cruz won with 43% of the vote. Okay, this goes back to the polling numbers. Sometimes he outperforms polls. He won with 43% of the vote, yet somehow opinion polling said that he would win with 37.2% of the vote, winning by 9%. But the final result was that he won by 17.1%. And also, if you compare the 2018, I don't think they have the county map on the Wikipedia page, but if you compare the county map from 2016, the Republican primary, and to the 2016 map in the Republican primary in 2016, I just repeated 2016 twice, it's around the same. Ted Cruz easily swept the entire state, and also his weaker areas, I guess you could say the Democratic areas. It was a couple of counties in 2016 where there are typically Democratic voters, and Ted Cruz swept the rest of the area that he needs to win. The same thing occurred in 2018, just Ted Cruz won a little bit more counties because of the fact that he was a popular incumbent at 48% approval rating. And also, overall, a number of these indications do say that this race will get close. I'm not denying that. I do see Ted Cruz winning by a narrow margin. By narrow, I mean compared to his 16% margin in 2012, possibly under 10%. Beto O'Rourke is at an amazing standing for a Democrat in the Texas Senate race here. This is a Democratic wave year. There is no reason why this race shouldn't get close, but keep in mind this is still the state of Texas. Texas has had the most Republican identity out of most southern states in previous elections. In 1992, it did not flip, even though Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, Iowa, a number of these states flipped. Texas did not. A number of these states did get close in previous elections. Texas did not, except for 2016. So when it came down to it, this state may be showing a little bit more Democratic tendencies. It could be the fact that this is just a Democratic wave year. It's definitely going to get close. Ted Cruz is not going to easily slide into re-election. Anything can happen. We are less than 100 days away from midterm elections, but still by the end of the day, I do see Ted Cruz narrowly winning in the Texas Senate race here. But it doesn't mean that this state is a lost cause for Democrats in future elections. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.